This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven. And today I'm joined by a really fascinating guy, Richard Claxton, who is the CEO of the NGS. And he has got so many interesting things that we could talk about. I mean, we could talk for a whole day, but obviously we've got about half an hour. So welcome, Richard. It's really lovely to meet you and to see you.
Oh, thank you for having me, Sarah. It's a real honour.
Oh, well, it's fantastic. And I'm just going to talk a tiny bit about my personal history with the NGS, and then we'll come on to the story of the charity. So I remember I was brought up in a gardening family in a place just outside Cambridge called Dockwra's Manor, and it honestly, it was the sort of highlight of the year, really, the NGS opening, partly because we sold ice creams, we sold orange mivvies and things like that, and strawberry mivvies. And so my parents would go to a cash and carry, I think, and buy these sort of boxes of ice creams, which I'm a twin, me and my twin sister would then sell out of the freezer. And the money, of course, would all go to the NGS, but it was such good fun. And we would bake scones, and it was just such a kind of old-fashioned, good sort of feeling where you were doing this thing as a family and with some volunteers from the village that made some cakes, and we had an amazing cake stall. And anyway, I mean, there is something very resonant of England, Britain, you know, the whole of the British Isles given by the NGS. Don't you think, Richard?
Yeah, it's something of a national treasure, and it's such a simple model that hasn't changed since 1927. It's kind of got generosity written right through the middle, right from the generosity, infinite generosity of the garden owners opening in the first place, and the generosity of the punters coming through. Tickets aren't hugely expensive, but it's, you know, hard times for people. The generosity of the cake bakers and the car park stewards and the people who deliver the booklets. And then the whole thing pivots round with this extraordinary job that I have to the generosity of giving £3.9 million away, all that's earned through these garden openings, and all of that money goes to support predominantly healthcare and nursing charities. And it's just a gorgeous thing. It was founded to support the first district nursing service in the country, and it still does. So there's a lovely virtuous circle there, right from the garden gate to these massive checks that I give away to these very grateful charities and the people that they serve.
So going back to healthcare, I mean, funnily enough, I'm an ex-doctor. You are only a very recently ex-doctor, but just talk us through how you got involved with the whole thing of the NGS and its sort of charitable and philanthropic work, really.
Well, I've been a lifelong gardener and have used gardening for my own sort of stress management and well-being, and I've always loved gardening. I've loved the creativity and the productivity, and I love working with nature and marking the seasons and the way it kind of keeps your stresses and problems in perspective. And I've loved garden visiting, and I remember visiting many gardens through the years through the National Garden Scheme. I never was really that aware of where the focus of the donations went until more recently. But I also had advised on gardening for my patients, and this is long before social prescribing was a thing.
So just to recap, so you were a GP, Richard. So
yeah,
you trained in London and then you became a GP and moved out to relatively near me at Perch Hill. So you live in Tunbridge.
Totally, yeah.
Been a GP in Tunbridge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So I was a practice in Tunbridge for 23 years. I was a GP for 25 years. And in the last sort of half of my GP career, we were more involved in getting gardens and health on the sort of national zeitgeist through a charity that I formed and some lobbying and some symposia that I ran. That charity is called Gardening for Health, and it maps out all the therapy gardens in the country. And then I did a garden design diploma, so I helped design a local hospice garden and some hospital courtyard gardens. And so the background to that is a healthcare situation where we're seeing more and more lifestyle related problems. And I see lots of the solutions in people's gardens. And so I'd encourage my patients to do that more and more, look out of their back door if they were lucky enough to have a garden and get busy, or go to the allotment or community garden. So when this job comes up, it's a sort of natural fit for me, because I can achieve what I was achieving on a one-to-one basis with many more people through links with these beneficiary charities as well.
Yeah. And one of the things that you're aiming to do, your ambitions, is to kind of bring the NGS right into the modern day. So, for instance, is there still a printed yellow book, or is that superseded by online? There is. I
confess I'd never bought one myself because I've always used the website or the app. But the booklets, the county booklets, have a massive distribution. There are 1.8 million county booklets circulated every year, which is a huge platform for us. And they're well loved. They're a bit slimmer than they used to be because we've cut down on the information on each garden tab because of the printing costs. But the website and the app are the mainstay of how a lot of people source their garden visits. And I'm pleased to say we've literally just launched a revised version of that search engine, so it's better, it's more functional. It works better for people to find out where they can visit a garden near them on such and such a date.
So you could literally sort of tap in a date and tap in a 50-mile radius or whatever.
County, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it'll tell you what's opening, whether or not they're opening as a set opening date, or if you have to contact the owners for a private view, which is called by arrangement. And you can drill down and look: is it dog friendly? Is there disability access problems, etc. So it's a much more functional thing than it used to be. So that's good, because we live and die by the garden visitors and the garden openings. And people like Macmillan and Marie Curie and Hospice UK and Parkinson's UK are all very, very mindful of our need to keep donating what we donate. So that all comes from the gardens.
And how many gardens are on your books now, including the by appointment ones?
3,200.
Wow. That's amazing.
It is. It's a fabulous, and they're all over the country. Sort of, we don't cover Scotland. Scotland has its own charity, the Scotland's Garden Scheme it's called. But Northern Ireland, Wales, and England, and the Channel Islands, and we're trying to get the numbers up. And partly what we're trying to do is broaden the range of gardens that people can visit. 99 years ago, the first gardens opened, and they were pretty much all stately homes, so very, very sizable properties.
Yes.
And I think sort of socio-economic times have changed. We absolutely adore those gardens, the ones that are still open for us, and they're a huge part of our heritage and our offer. But we also want to embrace, dare I say, slightly more relatable spaces for people to see what they could achieve in their own gardens, and more in the way of group openings in villages and towns, or neighbourhoods and streets, more in the way of community gardens, more in the way of allotment societies. These are all welcome, because gardening encompasses everyone, and gardens are for everyone. And there's something uniquely universal about the approach, not just of the gardens that we want on our books, but that's mirrored in the beneficiary charities that we feed, because no one, in however big or small your property, you're all going to be affected by cancers or Parkinson's. And so there's a kind of real symmetry there in a symbolic way that I think is really powerful.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing, of course, is with our demographic change to cities, and more people don't have a garden. They might have a balcony, but of course, so it's not just relevant to those who want inspiration for their gardens. It's for those who want to get out and about and hear the birds and the bees, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And there's two ways to answer that particular point. One is that, number one, yes, a garden visit is a wonderful thing to do, especially if you don't have access to green space yourself directly. But also we're sort of championing a bit of a lobbying piece on new build gardens and access to green space in the construction industry. And we've got a group opening and some solid single openings, which are around new build spaces. So they're a really powerful message and very popular because people can see what they can achieve. I was at a garden opening in Bexhill, a group opening on Saturday, and on a housing estate there were 2 gardens that are less than 3 years old. And it's extraordinary what they've achieved, especially when you think about builders tend to, with all due respect, they tend to focus mainly on the actual bricks and mortar in the property, don't they? So that it's all singing and dancing, the actual house that you build, and the actual outdoor space is often 18 inches of rubble with some desiccated turf lying on top of it.
Yes.
And so actually we'd dearly love to change that as a standard for the construction industry by championing a lot of the stuff that can be done in garden industries and in construction. And in the same way, we're trying to champion platforms of sustainable gardening and biodiversity gardening through our gardens and through our messaging as well, because gardens can solve so many of the problems that we face, both in terms of lifestyles and in terms of climate change and ecology and biodiversity. But you're absolutely right. It's a travesty in this country that 13% of the population doesn't have access to a garden or green space themselves. If you look at inner cities like London or Sheffield, that rises to 22, 23%. Gosh. And if you look to people in those areas of Black, Asian, minority ethnic background, that goes to over 40%. Gosh. Which is horrifying and something we desperately need to change at central government and planning level.
Do you know, it's so interesting that, I went to a pick your own between where you live and where I live at the weekend with one of my children, and we came back to make jam, having picked strawberries and raspberries. But it was absolutely, totally humming with people, and we didn't hear the English language. It was really exciting. Do you see what I mean? So it was extraordinary, the diversity of people that were visiting the Pick Your Own. And we actually chatted to one family who were having a picnic, and it turned out that they'd come from southeast London. So, a trip for an hour and a quarter or whatever to this place. And they do it every year with multi-generational cousins, uncles, aunts, a whole lot. And they come and then they go back and do a sort of great preserving sort of thing.
How
and
lovely.
There were lots of Ukrainians. It was exhilaratingly, considering I live in Sussex, which is not on the whole like that very much. It was exciting, and it was, I'm sure, answering a need, just like you say, of
very cosmopolitan.
Very cosmopolitan.
I think we've forgotten in this country because we kind of embraced supermarket culture, with the exception of America, as readily as anyone else in the world, and you do sense, especially in Poland and Ukraine, that there's a deeper connection with agriculture and with growing stuff. One of the places I garden on is on an allotment. And on the allotment, there's a family who, as you say, 3 generations are the same. They're from the Ukraine, and they are seriously growing crops. Yeah. It's almost, they're very, very committed to it. Yeah. And they're almost sort of industrial in their approach. It's
yes,
there's
exactly.
me having a little potter on my arm with a bit of loose sedimentals and whatever else, but they're regimented rows of spuds and dwarf beans, really impressive. And they're there every weekend and they love it, and it's part of their life. And we've lost something, I think, in our connection to our ancestors, because And that sort of chimes again with what you and I were talking about earlier about lifestyle change. Evolutionarily, our biology was developed to be living in nature. Our psychology and our cognitive function, our anatomy, our bone structure, our muscle structure, our core strength, the ability to use our bodies. But more than that, things like our immune systems and our blood systems and our hormone systems, they were all developed over thousands and thousands and thousands of years and so many generations to live in a natural environment surrounded by green, with the dirt and the lack of sanitation that living in nature gave, and hunter-gathering and growing stuff. And it's really only very recently in our evolution that we've moved indoors.
Yeah.
And as I say, now supermarkets are now sofas where you swipe and you get your food delivered in an ultra-processed way. And I think we've lost something there. And again, I think gardening has so many of the answers, and it's so readily available for that lucky 87%.
Yes. So you can hear, everybody, that the NGS has gone through a big change, not just with Richard. I mean, I'm sure it's evolved, but from, as you say, the sort of the rectory, the manor house and the stately home to something of a very different breadth, really. And I'd love you to talk about a couple of projects. Maybe one particularly that resonates with me is the ITU at the top of King's Hospital in London, which is just extraordinary that there is now a roof garden, which I know you and the NGS were involved with in its sort of nascent stage.
Yeah, so this is a fabulous project, and it quite rightly sort of caught the imagination of the public through the media coverage when it was formally opened the other week. I went to the opening. It was in the middle of Chelsea Flower Show week, so it was a welcome respite from the glitz and the glamour there. But it's an amazing project, and we were very proud to be able to contribute some of the funding for it, and in particular for the planting. If anyone hasn't seen the pictures of it, it's extraordinary architectural design and beautiful horticulture at kind of bed height or chair height level through raised beds on a roof with multi-stem trees, shrubs, grasses, perennials, all of which are planted in beds which have a kind of locker system, and the lockers enclose the plant, the other kind of plant. So the plumbing and the gases for the life support machines and the electricity and the network for the data collection and the patient's monitors, so that the beds or the wheelchairs can just be there and the patients can stop looking at the plain polystyrene ceiling tiles and start see blue sky. Or the green of the climbers growing up the arches around them, or the trees, and they can look through these glass balustrades. Sounds such a simple thing in design terms, but to have clear glass balustrades so that you can look down through them to Ruskin Park and the tree canopy there, and you're all in the shadow of the helicopter landing pad. It's slightly surreal, but it's gorgeous, and I think it's going to be a game changer for intensive care units. And we have a strand of funding that just to explain that where our money goes, the bulk of it goes to 6 main charities. They are Parkinson's UK, Hospice UK, Macmillan and Marie Curie, the Carers Trust, and the Queen's Institute for Community Nursing. And so, as I said, we were founded for the Queen's nurses back in nearly 100 years ago. And then there are gardens and health projects that we fund. So we're the biggest long-term funder for Horatio's Garden. We fund Maggie's Gardens. We fund the Army Benevolent Fund and various other projects, including this one. So every year we get to choose from applicants for projects like this one. So this was a lovely one to fund.
Incredible.
And in the queue for this next year's funding round, I'm looking at applications from at least one other intensive care unit, but other gardens attached to dementia units or children and adolescent mental health units and things like that. So we're using money from cakes and cups of tea and, as you say, ice creams from the freezer, as well as garden entries, to an amazing effect. I should just add the other strand of money that we have. We have a donation through the Julia Rousing Trust, which goes to community gardens. So we give about £330,000 away for community gardens. And we also have a significant chunk of money going to gardeners and horticulturalists support charities. So people like Perennial and the Professional Gardeners Trust and various training schemes for gardeners in the making.
Absolutely incredible. Who knew? I mean, I'm ashamed to say I'm a gardener. I've opened the garden for the NGS for for years, and I really didn't know all that. So it's unbelievably inspiring. And you're coming up to the 100 years. You're coming up to the centenary. So are there great plans for that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to try and make every single garden opening through the whole of 2027 a celebration. We've got hopefully a good chunk of the original 600 gardens that opened in 1927 are going to open for us. A lot of them do anyway, still, and they are just marvellous gardens and beautiful. But we're persuading quite a lot of the others to come back on board. And then we're going to have quite a lot of publicity, quite a lot of events, things like Gardeners World magazine, charity. We're hopefully going to have a show garden at Gardeners World Live. We're going to have a show garden at the Yorkshire Show, and there are various other festivals and events that are happening to celebrate the 100 years and to thank you, either to say thank you to the volunteers and the garden owners. Yeah. But also to celebrate and try and raise money. So there's going to be quite a lot ongoing. So if people want to find out what's going on, either nationally or near them, do sign up to our newsletters, our e-news through the website, the National Garden Scheme website, or simply follow us on Instagram and you'll get lots of information that way.
Brilliant. Oh, Richard, well, it was very, very good to hear all of that inspiring information. And roll on more garden visiting, I'd say. It's the best way to learn how to garden, see how other people do it and ask questions.
Absolutely. I would be half the gardener that I am if I hadn't done loads of garden visiting.
Yeah.
And now it's part of my job. I'm the cat that got the cream.
Yeah. Excellent. Lovely to meet you and lovely to chat.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thanks very much for listening to me with Richard Claxton, chatting to him about the NGS. Next week, I'm joined by an old friend, Matthew Rice, who is a painter, an illustrator, a draftsman, and a brilliant gardener. And he is going to talk about using gardens as inspiration for his paintings, drawings, and life. So see you then.
You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.